Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Religious Studies Retzel Family Lecture. For those who don't know me, my name is Catherine Gerbner, and I am the director of the Religious Studies program. Since 2011, this annual lecture has been the marquee event for our program, bringing exceptional scholars of religion to the University of Minnesota to share thoughtful, creative, and boundary-pushing scholarship with our community. Tonight promises to be all of these things, and I want to take a few minutes here at the beginning to offer some background on the Religious Studies program to those who don't know, and also share why this is such an important moment for our program. So Religious Studies was launched in 2008 here at the University of Minnesota. It's an interdepartmental program with 48 core and affiliate faculty representing 17 different departments. We offer a major and minor in religious studies, as well as a minor in Islamic studies. And I know many of our students are here this evening, so I want to recognize the incredible work they are doing. We are also fortunate to be joined by many individuals who have played a crucial role in creating and expanding the religious studies program. So I want to briefly acknowledge two vital figures. First, my predecessor as director of religious studies, Jean Kildee, who worked tirelessly to create the exciting religious studies program that we have today. Thank you, Jean, for all, you have many fans here today. Thank you for all you did to build religious studies and for being here today. I also want to acknowledge the person who helped start the religious studies program and also generously endowed this lecture series, Cal Retzel, who's also here. Cal means so much to this program, both in its genesis and its continued success. Thank you for all that you have done and continue to do for religious studies, Cal. We also sincerely appreciate the support of our co-sponsors, the School of Music, the Department of African American and African Studies, and the Department of Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature. The exciting thing about an evening like tonight is that it brings so many of us together with different relationships to religious studies. We're students, scholars, and community members. We are those instrumental in the development of the program, those studying religion today, and those of us working to build a more robust program that meets the demands of the current world. All of us are invested in our shared passion for the study of religion, a field of study that remains crucially important in times such as these. So for those of you who are not formally connected with the program but wish to be, I encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. You can do so out front, and I'll remind you again at the end. There's always room for more contributors to the Religious Studies program, whether you want to sign up for a major, become affiliated faculty, or be involved in some other way. So please introduce yourself to me or our Associate Director, Nathaniel Homewood, who's standing in the back. We would love to connect with you. And now I want to turn to a very special guest who will be offering welcome remarks and introducing our speaker for today. It is a distinct honor to have the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, Dr. Jashun Aviles, here today to offer welcome remarks and introduce our incredible speaker, Dr. Anthony Pinn. Dean Aviles joined us here at the U in November of last year, and with the many responsibilities demanding his attention, we are very thankful that he has joined us here this evening and are so grateful for his support of the Religious Studies program. Dean Aviles holds a PhD in English from the University of Pennsylvania, and he is a prominent cultural studies scholar specializing in contemporary African American and Black diasporic literature and visual culture. Throughout his scholarship, he works in the fields of political radicalism, spatial theory, gender studies, and medical humanities. Prior to his arrival at CLA, Dean Aviles served as a professor of English and Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Arts and Humanities at the University of Maryland's College Park. He was also the founding director of the Frederick Douglass Center for Leadership Through the Humanities. We are elated to welcome him to the U and to our Retzel Family Lecture this evening. Thank you for joining us, Dean Aviles, and I now invite you to share some welcome remarks and introduce our distinguished lecturer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and it's a pleasure to be here. I do keep a very busy schedule, but actually it's events like this that make me remember why I do the work I do, is to ensure this kind of scholarship and engagement. So I appreciate the invitation to be here. And welcome. I'm glad you all are here for this year's Retzel Lecture, hosted by Religious Studies. And this event actually comes at an exciting moment of transition and growth for the program Religious Studies. Over the past year, the program has moved into the Institute of Global Studies within CLA, expanding its connections and impact. The program has welcomed new leadership, you heard from her, taking over as director following the retirement of longtime leader Dr. Jean Kildee last January. In addition, Religious Studies has brought on a new full-time associate director. You've heard about him already, Dr. Nathaniel Homewood, whose expertise will further enrich the work going on in the program. Beyond these leadership changes, the program is evolving in important ways. A curriculum revision initiative is underway, ensuring that students continue to engage with timely and relevant scholarship. The program is also collaborating with departments across CLA, as you've heard, to hire scholars specializing in early Islam and Buddhist studies, strengthening its offerings in these vital areas. And actually right now, those kinds of hires we need to have as soon as possible on campus. Against this backdrop of growth, it is especially meaningful to welcome this year's Retzel lecturer, Dr. Anthony Penn. Dr. Penn is a leading scholar of African American religions, and we are honored to have him with us today. His presence here is significant for more than just his scholarship. Dr. Penn has deep connections to our Religious Studies program. He was a former colleague of Dr. Cal Retzel, who not only established this lecture series, but also played a key role in founding the program, as you've heard. In addition, Dr. Penn is the director of research for the Institute of Humanist Studies, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank. Penn's research interests include religion and culture, Black religious thought, humanism, and hip-hop culture, a real interdisciplinary scholar in many ways. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that interdisciplinarity in a second. He's the author-editor of more than 35 books. I'll say that one more time. Let it sink in. 35 books, author-editor, including The Black Practice of Disbelief, Death Life, Hip-Hop and the Thanatological Narrations of Blackness, and Interplay of Things, Religion, Art, and Presence Together. Additionally, Dr. Penn served as the PhD advisor to our new associate director, Dr. Homewood. These ties make today's lecture not just an academic event, but a family gathering of sorts, one that highlights the meaningful relationships that shape the study of religion. And I do want to say, you've heard that I'm a literary scholar. I don't have my dean's hat on. I'm a specialist in Black life, culture, and art. And it's actually especially meaningful for me to introduce you as a scholar of African American religion and interdisciplinary studies as kind of a scholarly homeboy, and I appreciate that I get to introduce you tonight. Lastly, this is a fitting occasion to express our gratitude to Dr. Retzel for his visionary leadership and steadfast support for religious studies over the past 2 decades. Thank you all for being here, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Anthony Penn for a talk entitled The Rhythm of Life, What Music Tells Us About Religion. Dr. Penn.
Thank you, Dean Avilles, for those kind words, to Drs. Gerbner and Homewood for the invitation, to all those who made this happen. I am deeply appreciative to you, my friends. Thank you for coming out. There are folks here I've not seen for better than 20 years. Last time I saw them, I still had a little hair up here. So it is wonderful to see them again. It's wonderful to see my new friends. So thank you for coming out. I've been doing this for about 30 years, but I still get extremely nervous. And even more so for this, because this isn't just any talk. You know, there are folks who treat you with kindness and grace, who look after you, yeah? And those folks, those are the folks who force you to think, where would I be without them? And for me, Calvin Retzel is one of those figures. And keep in mind, coming out of graduate school, I applied for every job I could find because I had bills to pay, right? So I needed a job. I applied for every job I could find listed. And there was a job at Macalester College in Minnesota That was for a historian, but I thought, okay, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens. And Kelvin Rutzel and David Hopper came up with a plan, because I did not qualify for that job. I read some history, but that was not enough to really qualify for that job. So Kelvin Rutzel and David Hopper worked out an agreement that would allow me to come in anticipation of David Hopper's retirement. Cal was just wonderful. One other story. During the initial phase of the interview process, I got a campus visit. So I'm celebrating with my friends and trying to figure out how to sound smart and humorous, right? How to sound like someone who would be a good colleague, the kind of person you want to have a cup of coffee with. So Cal Rutzel asked me, one of the dinners will be at my home. What would you like to eat? And I think, being clever, I said, well, let's barbecue. Well, this is winter. Winter. And Cal Rutzel said, okay. I get to Minnesota. I'm at his house. It is cold. It is a cold I had never experienced before. And I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I had never experienced this level of cold. And so we're sitting in the living room in Cal's house on Jefferson, and he puts on his coat and a hat and gloves. And I asked, well, where are you going? He said, to the grill. And from that moment moving forward, Cal looked out for me. More than a colleague, he was a friend. I have nothing but love for Cal Rutzel. So for me, this is particularly meaningful. I'm one who argues we are already and always embedded in the stories we tell, that we are positioned in an intimate fashion in the histories we narrate. So in a certain sense, there's something about the histories we tell that are autobiographical. And I want to lean into that tonight. So what I want to share with you is drawn from a book I've been working on that pulls together what I've been thinking about relationship between religion and music for 30 years. And the question I ask with that volume is, why does religion and music, the intersection of those, matter to me? Why is that intersection important? And I really can't get at that. It didn't take long for me to realize I could not get at that and pretend objectivity. That was just not going to work. There was something deeply subjective about this deep determination to bring music and religion together, particularly hip hop. And hip hop was significant for me growing up as a teenager in Buffalo, New York. It gave me a grammar and a vocabulary to explain my relationship to the world. It gave me a way to defy a social world that would rather me dead. Gave me a way to appreciate and render creative a kind of anger with the world. And that was deeply important. There were ways in which that sense, that connection to the world, that posture towards the social world that music provided, hip hop provided, was also embedded in my early religious involvements. I was a child preacher, right? And there were ways in which hip hop and church involvement said something about the meaning-making processes that shaped Anthony Bernard Penn. So I want to share some of that with you. Now, Dr. Homewood told me, he promised me that all I would have to do is press a couple of arrows on this to get the slides moved. I was, against my will, pulled out of the 20th century into the 21st century. Left to my own devices, I would still use my transparencies. I think those things hit, but I'm trying to do better. So I put together what doesn't really qualify as a PowerPoint presentation, but an effort to present something that was PowerPoint-like. And Dr. Homewood changed that, improved it, and this is what you see. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Thank you very much. But if I need more than these two arrows, that's on you. And so I want to begin with a trigger warning. And this only comes into play with the last several pieces. But it has been my practice, and it will remain my practice, to allow artists to speak as they desire to speak, to express ideas using the grammar and vocabulary that is meaningful to them. Whether it renders us comfortable or uncomfortable, for me, is irrelevant. Allow them to speak in a way that is authentic, that captures how they are understanding the world. And that will come with some language that we typically don't use in polite company, but you're going to hear it. And so you have been warned. See, that, I was even back then, I was suave, right? I picked out that tie. I picked out the glasses. I had my do just right. That took some work. You have to appreciate that. It took some work. That picture, I'm about 10 or 11 years old, and you'll have a sense of why I think it's important to share that. Reflecting back over the years, it is difficult for me not to connect life with some type of music. And so as the years passed, I came to mark off and commemorate major moments of my maturation with songs, my fears, desires, anxieties, sorrows. My connection to music has involved both a personal appreciation for various genres, especially hip hop, and over the past 30 years, a professional commitment to writing about the importance of music for understanding the nature and meaning of religion, particularly Black belief and Black disbelief. Over the decades, I've made an effort to keep these two motivations intertwined. In a word, my personal and professional growth have a soundtrack. The sound, rhythm, melody, harmony, and beat that came together to constitute music were found throughout the geography defining my life arrangements and activities. It's almost like in the movies, music marked down the ebb and flow of my experiences, amplifying their effective and epistemological significance. There was something musical about my effort to travel through the world with an increased sense of who I was and what I wanted to accomplish, while larger circumstances always made me remember a world that pushed against me. Music refocused language, ripping, opening, and reshaping it through shortening or elongation of vibrations so that it could reflect reality covered by a certain set of concerns and possibilities. Now, my first independent music purchase, as far as a weekly allowance can signal independence, was an album of Scott Joplin's Ragtime. The songs by this artist, working in the late 19th and early 20th century, aren't exactly the type of music one would expect a preteen to find appealing, let alone buy. But it appealed, and I did. I don't recall why Joplin caught my attention, but I can still hear the entertainer, not the more famous Maple Leaf Rag, whenever I think of him. Perhaps it was the 1977 movie Scott Joplin starring Billy D. Williams that sparked my interest by amplifying his prestige, importance, and allure, and creating a curiosity about the musician important enough to make a movie about. Maybe it was his picture on the album cover, a Black man dignified and stoic like a preacher, but making music rather than writing sermons. It could have been the subtle irreverence, the provocative playfulness of the music that captured me, the defiant smile in the face of social terror, although at the time I wasn't able to put a name on it. My understanding of Joplin's impact beyond the tunes on that particular album would come far along in life. However, maybe I sensed back then what I would only come to appreciate years later as I grew to understand that despite his preference for concert halls and social refinement as the proper orientation for his music, there's an earthy something within it that made it just as fitting for the more casual and less refined honky-tonk environment. And that organic fluidity aided its transformation into musical genres like jazz. In a word, his genius informed many of the musical genres that moved and motivated me over the years. Let's take a listen. Whatever the impulse, after that purchase of Joplin's Ragtime, walking to the big music store, the long gone record theater in Buffalo, New York, it was about 20, 30 minutes from my house, to buy or browse was a marker of my shifting identity and relationship to the social world. During my treks to that store, I occupied time and space on my own terms, temporarily, of course, and that framed some of my growing independence as the ability to go my own way. I anticipated what I would find and looked forward to the familiar faces I might see moving down the store's aisles, bumping against the shelves and display cabinets crowded with albums organized by genre and in alphabetical order. I'd hum along with the songs played through the sound system, and then holding tight my purchase, I make my way back home, continuing to hum the music I'd heard in the shop. The sound moved against, around, and through my changing body. Going alone to the record store was tied to another marker of maturation, the ability to use the stereo or record player without supervision. That freedom of expression said a lot in that it spoke to a right level of responsibility, a move away from pure childhood connoted by a firm enough appreciation for music and the expense of that household item to orchestrate it and to determine what songs marked a particular moment. It was an honor to use the stereo, a welcome introduction to a new technology for encountering the world. It wasn't long before folks in the neighborhood heard the word that you took care of your records and that you had good musical taste. One's LPs were social, political, and at times religious or at least soulful commentary. Mindful of this, the record player wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was a prized possession, a type of magical device with the ability to transport us to different times and places, blurring past and present. And with the right artists, like Parliament and Funkadelic P-Funk or Sun Ra, the future also was expressed through a new and imaginative grammar and vocabulary of a relationship punctuated by a cosmic sound often perceived as free from some of the typical social conventions. P-Funk, during periods of trauma and misery within the social world expressed through heightened anti-Blackness on the heels of the Civil Rights Movement, offered alternate worlds with patterns of interaction that signified U.S. structures of difference as dilemma. I'll never forget these words from P-Funk Wants to Funk You Up. It's better if you hear them directly from the source.
A good evening. Do not attempt to adjust your radio. There is nothing wrong. We have taken control as to bring you this special show. We will return it to you as soon as you are grooving. Welcome to station WEFUNK, better known as We Funk, or deeper still, the Mothership Connection, home of the extraterrestrial brothers, dealers of funky music, P-Funk, Uncut Funk, the bomb.
Coming to you directly from the mothership, top of the chocolate Milky Way, 500,000 kilowatts of P-Funk power. So kick back, dig, while we do it to you in your eardrums. Oh, me, I'm known as Lollipop Man, alias the long-haired.
Did you feel that? As a reviewer noted concerning the sounds of Sun Ra on the futuristic sounds of Sun Ra, and I quote, "What exactly are these new otherworldly emotions?" For me to try to pin it down for you would be to go against the grain of what the music is trying to say. We all have to find out for ourselves personally. The futuristic sounds of Sun Ra sounds like the imagination at work. That hits different, right? Pulls for a different type of attention, pulls at a different dimension of your consciousness. P-Funk and Sun Ra explored a future growing out of a vibrant blackness, what we might now call Afrofuturism. While my thinking doesn't move in the direction of Afrofuturism as an intellectual and moral orientation, we can talk about that if you'd like when we chat. There was and remains something special about that music that inspired and that speaks an imaginative resistance to things as they were, despite whether or not new worlds ever emerge. Music served as a powerful dynamic of expressive culture that shaped how many named and processed physical and psychosocial encounters in and with the world. Experience was amplified and explored by means of sounds emanating and sometimes more like exploding through an intentional manipulation of vibration to elicit multidimensional responses. Music was accessible but also distant, as it spoke of worlds both familiar and beyond our grasp. At other times, this distance was constituted by the world of interactions lamented and the world of possibilities believed more desirable. In either case, in either way, music spoke a reality full of complexities, layered situations, and competing possibilities. Music isn't always a celebratory perspective regarding circumstances, but that notwithstanding, it offers a way to process those conditions so as to avoid being consumed by them. Even musical laments serve to signify through a call to lucidity, of awareness that enables continuation despite all. You'll hear Albert Camus in that, and that is intentional. He is one of my mentors, and so his understanding of lucidity and awareness and how that allows us to push against the world, to continuously say no against a world that encounters us with absurdity, right? And for him, it's that lucidity, that awareness that is our tool, right? That this world doesn't bend to us. We ask it questions and it meets us with silence. What we encounter is the absurd. But through this awareness, through this lucidity, we develop the ability not to be broken by that silence and to recognize within the context of our social world, the victory may simply be the ability to say no to injustice with increased volume and persistence. That may be the only win, right? So he thinks in terms of Sisyphus rolling that rock that comes back down and rolling it again, and the Greek gods thinking this will destroy him, but for Camus, it does not destroy him. He reaches a moment of clarity, of awareness, better understands the human condition, and that is a win. And so Camus ends that short essay about Sisyphus with a phrase like this: one must imagine Sisyphus happy. And so for me, there are ways in which thinking about music within the context of religious studies, that music doesn't solve the problems, but it helps to foster a sense of lucidity, awareness, a better appreciation for our circumstances. The technology for music making and listening has radically changed. But back in the day, as was the case for most of the folks in my hood, the record player or stereo system was prized and was a central component of the living room, or in my house, it was the front room, the room that we only used when guests came. You didn't play around in the front room. That was for guests, and that was where the stereo was located. In many of these homes, place was essential and assumed for the stereo. A place was similar for the stereo that one found in the context of the family Bible. And that stereo system was just as guarded from foolishness and disrespect as that family Bible. The Bible's pages were turned with intentionality, and a steady hand gently guided the needle across that LP. The pages of the Bible had to be held with great care. Causing a rip would get you sent to your room, if not worse, because they weren't just pages in a book. They were the physical containers of cosmic concerns made material. And the record, later the 8-track, tapes, cassettes, then the CD, would have their own maintenance practices and had to be treated with the same care, wiped off, kept away from direct sunlight, and the needle gently lowered onto that LP or 45. The sacred book in some cases provided a link to family and community, as the name of newborns often were added to the family tree outlined in the spaces for such reflection in the front or the back of that Bible. On the other hand, the album collection served as a kind of listening tree, representing a host of family and friends whose presence was tied to memories around moments of life connected to particular songs. In this way, both albums and the Bible spoke a world acknowledged through the senses. One might think of them as constituting linguistically arranged modes of meaning. Music guided the structuring of time in two of the most significant locations of life for me. In the church, service moved along in part through music that communicated shifts in the order of service. Think about it this way. Music of the procession indicated worship had started. The song of fellowship encouraged us to get up and greet each other. A choir selection prepared us for the preacher to mount the pulpit. The song after the sermon marked a time for people to come to Christ. A somber song of reflection led people to the altar. And a final upbeat hymn led people out of their pews and to the back of the church. Service was done. Now at home, gospel music might give way to the more familiar and defiant sounds of R&B, blues, jazz, and hip hop. And as the music played, the sound offered opportunity for reflection that informed movement through the world when the sacred book wasn't in hand. Even so-called secular music, like religious engagement, had a kind of sacred quality in that it exposed, signified, and transported listeners by harnessing language, manipulating sound, and thereby opened listeners to intensified, effective registers of encounter, both personal and tragically unfamiliar. Music could be the data and occasion for life lessons meant to hold us in place, while also calling us to journey and find joy even when engulfed in a social world more inclined to offer misery and pain. The Bible could spark imagination that transported the reader into alternate historical occurrences, but there remained a type of gap in the form of unawareness and cultural disconnect between the one reading and the worlds encountered. The biblical text is a code of sorts that offers moral and ethical insights gleaned through a range of scripted experiences. But even the most avid reader appreciates these cosmically framed narratives only from an epistemologically and existential distance. The stereo was different, a device for a type of engagement that closed distance and blurred distinction through shared effective responses to the world, a similarity of experience that didn't always require the same bracketing of cultural worlds often required by the biblical text. That is to say, the stereo afforded not an identical experience, but one that was plausible for the most part. Even wild dreams within certain genres were tethered to a familiar social world. Music touched the world and is touched by the world, and we find engrossing the sound of that contact. What the stereo produced offered an alternate type of salvation, that is introspection, encouragement, newly energized epistemological engagement with the world, and all with a beat. This is not to say all musical selections or all biblical passages were celebratory. Every day can't be sunshine. Many were warnings of impending judgment, like the spiritual reimagined by Nina Simone.
Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Where you gonna run to? All on that day, will I run to the rock?
I'm going to speed up a bit because I do want us to have a chance to chat. The symbolism in religion and the symbolism embedded in music are intertwined at times. When saying this, I am mindful of the novelist Ralph Ellison's reflection on the jazz musicians he encountered as a young man in Oklahoma City. These musicians spent time and energy working to fine-tune their ability to produce and I quote, eloquent expression of idea emotion, end quote. He continues, and this is the important point of convergence, of commitment that draws the devotee into their calling. Some wore their instruments, he notes, as priests wear the cross. In this situation, both the musical instrument and the cross serve as signs of sacrifice for the sake of something significant and transformative, a something that calls humans to imagine worlds different than the circumstances that hold them bound. Now, my goal with this comparison to the biblical text isn't to force a theological rendering of music constituting a spiritualized sameness, but rather to give some sense of how I perceive music's relationship to the human in the process of becoming. The manner in which music holds importance as a tool of interpretation that exposes and deciphers the questions and concerns that amplify existence. In this sense, to the extent I have at times understood religion as an ethically orchestrated quest for complex subjectivity, I've changed my mind on this a bit, and we can chat about that. But for a good number of years, I argued that what we have been fixated on in the study of Black religion isn't really religion. It's the material trappings of a more fundamental impulse, right? That these churches and mosques and synagogues, these books of discipline, these hymnals, those are all historical manifestations of a much more fundamental impulse. And it is this fundamental impulse that really constitutes religion. The rest are the material trappings of religion. So what is religion? It's a quest for complex subjectivity. It's the effort to come to grips with the fundamental questions of our existence. Who are we? What are we? When are we? Why are we? And in this way, I hoped a way to kind of free us from a fixation in my field on the Black church, and to kind of think in more expansive terms concerning how Black folks have tried to invent themselves in a world that was meant for their destruction. And that this took a variety of forms that we did not appreciate if we only thought in terms of the Black church, the Nation of Islam, voodoo, conjure, Santeria, that there was a much more fundamental impulse that wasn't fully captured through the grammar and vocabulary that named those traditions, the quest for complex subjectivity. And so what I'm arguing here is that what you get with religion is a kind of poetic engagement with those questions. A poetic engagement. And for me, this is best amplified through hip hop. And think in terms of the DJ and what the DJ does with that album. The DJ uses that album in a way that was not intended. He or she takes that album and makes it tell an alternate story. And amplifies, kind of signifies aesthetics, kind of signifies social codes by privileging what the dominant perception of music would consider the noise, the distraction. And so my argument is that what you get with music is an effort to wrestle with these same sorts of questions, but to do it in a way that is deeply poetic. And by poetic, I mean a destruction of language in order to free it to tell a different story. And this is what you get from my vantage point with music. Why does hip hop matter? Hip hop matters because it constitutes a way in which certain folks have tried to see themselves within the context of the world, to wrestle with issues of meaning on a fundamental level, to wrestle with issues of meaning in a way that pulls at our ontological and existential and epistemological concerns and grounding. Music does this. It just does it with a beat. Now, is it too much to say where there is music, there is life? Now, this isn't the same as saying music is life, but rather that music punctuates, and wrestles with experiences that structure what we call life. And so doing, music may amplify particular dimensions of existential meaning, might encourage particular life orientations and movements, and might warn against particular uses of one's time. But most importantly, music brings attention to patterns of thought that inform how we see and understand our movement through the world. In this way, it functions as an interpretive device equipped to capture the nuance, the tone, the texture, the rhythmic nature of life and present its dynamics through the power of the poetic. Music points towards multiple routes at the same time, encodes this dynamic positionality through a grammar and vocabulary of human reflexivity. It cuts across time and connects to worlds of thought in a manner reminiscent of the trickster's ability to open relationships between realms of existence. In fact, for some, listening to music with focused intent might qualify as a type of mystical experience to the degree mysticism is concerned with the intersections of the seen and the unseen, the contemplation of what can't be fully named, an effective turn where logic fails but feeling is sublime. And all this is to name a more elastic sense of possibilities, dimensions, and reach. I'd like the oral vulnerability and the sonic jaggedness of the LP, the skips, the pops, the crackling that came with the needle moving across the surface of that vinyl record and caused by dust and static electricity. And this, in part, entails a mystical element. Yet for many, that popping sound wasn't music, but rather noise, a distraction from the real intent of the artist. That wasn't the case for me. There was a beauty in the full range of sounds, including sonic inconsistencies coming from the LP. And this beauty wasn't tied to completeness or sonic creativity as a type of perfection. Rather, it was to be found in the ability of music to hold in creative tension, both intentionality and flaw. Placement of the needle on the vinyl was key, marking the start of this intersection of intentional sound and noise. The compelling presentation of song as message was accompanied by sound as imperfection. And this was a type of harmony in disjunction. There was a splendor in the skipping and the popping sounds constituting the unplanned elements of musical expression. That is a reminder of our fragility, our incompleteness. For my mind, to enhance and clean the presentation of that arrangement of sound would deny the incomplete nature of human creativity. In a way, such refinement might serve to damper the interaction between imperfect humans and their engagement with others involved in the making and expression of music. Experience of the song came with accountability, a mode of responsibility associated with engaging the LP and the record player or stereo that spoke a confluence of forces pointing out both the power and vulnerability of sonic play. Touch signaled a transformationalist impulsiveness with and between things, body, needle, record, electricity, all involved in a type of mutuality. The senses are engaged and the mind expresses the world as it is while also seeing what it was and what might be. As I've noted before, this application of sound doesn't necessarily change physical conditions. I'm not making that argument, but it has the potential to increase awareness that allows for a different type of connection with self and others through a more defiant positioning. Love in a world that denies love. Resistance within a world demanding compliance. Friendships in a world promoting radical individualism. And imagination in a world that seeks conformity. Continuing this pattern of thought, novelist Richard Wright understood his writing to be the equivalent of the blues. Raw, subversive, signifying, an unconquered expression of life in a death-dealing social world. That said, I'm not calling for a sense of music as being of necessity, a mode of disruption. Rather, I'm suggesting function, not form. By this, I mean to say music is often used by listeners as a means of existential protest. And in so doing, listeners imply utility that supersedes the musician's intent, as if we can know that intent. Furthermore, there is a folk wisdom quality to the use of music that entails a signifying application of sound and symbols. In a sense, the device or technology used to present music is something of a talisman. with the ability to alter perception of experience, and in so doing, encourage particular and fleeting existential responses that pull the individual out of herself, while also fostering deeper introspection. But the talisman has little significance without human work. Now, here's something of this desire for song when Alice Walker says, and I quote, "When I am in a country where people still sing spontaneously while working or even while strolling along the street or beach, I feel comforted and at home. I regret deeply that more people and more countries have given up the gift to others that is voluntary song. It is true, many great voices have been captured on machines, and I'm not ungrateful. But if humans lose completely our human tendency to burst into song when the Spirit moves us, we will be like birds who never learn to fly." Now, I acknowledge home wasn't the only place where music marked out time and space, yet there was a specialness to home as a space of one's own, both in and away from the world. Hence, in a certain sense, home typically looked like us and looked more like us than any other space we occupied during the course of the day. It looked like us if for no other reason than because it provided familiarity through our belongings arranged as we saw fit, with places dedicated for our purposes, allowing a type of spatiality, organized intimacy. I couldn't call it a safe space. After all, I acknowledge what can happen in homes. And I also acknowledge a question. What is safe about any space, public or private, in the context of the United States in the 21st century? But rather, I understand it as a distinct space, which is to say an effectively and socially alternate location in which, for a particular time frame, outside obligations and interactions can be suspended. And for me, a clear example of this is found in Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. These important conversations concerning personhood, of place, of racial dynamics are worked out in the context of that living room, that this is a space in which they can catch their breath to the extent Black folks in an anti-Black world can catch their breath and contemplate future. For me, that is significant. It's not a place defined by alone time per se, in that the creators of the music, if no one else, can be said to claim presence, interacting, calling, assuring, pushing, prodding, enabling. The overlap between the social world that impacts us and the possible worlds poetically built and described in music were encountered with fewer external distractions due to the familiarity of home. The home space, for the most part, but not always, was as we needed it to be, complete with reminders of intimate and casual connections and things that spoke a type of comfort. Every phase of my development, from high school through graduate school, and now as professional life as an academic, is marked by some type of contact and interaction with hip hop. It is something of a touchstone for me, helping me to see the margins of collective life and how life happens as a process of signified celebration and resistance. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five helped to describe the effective connotations of urban decay with a phrase that resonates through the years. We'll take a listen.
It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Broken glass everywhere, people
On the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice.
I'm from H-Town, Houston, so I gotta shout out a Houston artist who I think kind of plays off of this in ways that are both haunting but revelatory, and that is Scarface. For my mind, Scarface is to music what Richard Wright is to literature, that they approach the world in a very similar way. They kind of wrestle with the uncomfortable dimensions of life without flinching and without blinking. For Richard Wright, it's Black boy, American hunger, it's native son, it's the outsider, it's the man who lived underground, right? An approach to life that doesn't blink, that doesn't flinch. And for Scarface, think in terms of mind playing tricks on me. I sit alone in a four corner room staring at candles, right? For him, there is this type of vulnerability that is constituted by our engagement with the social world. He recognizes it, but I would argue nowhere in his music is he defeated by it. That he confronts death. And he confronts death in a way that I think more recently Kendrick Lamar has. Think in terms of Damn. Are you familiar with that album? It's one of my favorites, so at least pretend like you are, right? And then go home and listen to it. Whether you play that album, Damn, forward or backward, it is bookended by death. It begins with Kendrick Lamar trying to do a good deed. And it seems to me this relates to some of the earlier work, right? All right. Sing About Me Dying of Thirst, right there. There is an effort to do something in the world that makes a difference, particularly in Sing About Me Dying of Thirst, right? That he has promised that he will not forget. There is something about engagement in the world that is supposed to give us more oomph. But with Damn, it begins with Kendrick Lamar doing what? Trying to do a good deed. And in doing this good deed, what happens? He gets got. Gunfire, he's gone. And it seems to me the rest of that album is a kind of wrestling with the intersections of life and death. And wrestling with the intersections of life and death that are meant to prompt questions of meaning, right? Kind of press questions concerning how we fit within the context of a social world. I hear in Kendrick Lamar's lyrics what James Baldwin says, I was born dead. And so for me, there are ways in which music helps to get at some of the more uncomfortable dimensions of human existence, dimensions that I don't think within the context of my area of study, the Black church, for example, has wrestled with in a really sustained and fundamental way. And I think there's something about the Black church's vertical orientation. And I'm not throwing shade, I'm not hating, I'm just trying to point something out, right? That there's something about this vertical orientation that decreases the trauma of death. Decreases the trauma of death. And I think there are ways in which, in particular, hip-hop culture wants us to wrestle with this on a plane that is horizontal, within the context of human history, within the context of our material existence, that it forces a question: what does history authorize us to say? And I think you get this with Kendrick Lamar, outside of the beef with Drake, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the beef with Drake. But what you get with Kendrick Lamar, it seems to me, is a kind of wrestling with this, a confrontation with the intersections, the ways in which Blackness is constituted by the intersections of life and death, the idea that Blackness is really a container for all of the fears and anxieties of the larger population, right? That to the extent the larger population is fearful of demise, and you can think about demise not only in physical terms, but as a loss of meaning, of irrelevance, that to the extent whiteness demands a certain type of ability to bracket off death, right? I mean, this is one of the privileges of whiteness, the ability to bracket off death, to think about life and death as separate, life and death. And how this happens, what affords that kind of distinction is the heavy lifting that Blackness is meant to do, that Blackness constitutes. It becomes a cipher for, a container for all of the fears and anxieties prompted by this social world, housed there, rendering a particular population safe, and rethinking, morphing, truncating another population. I think hip hop wrestles with that. Let's take a listen to a bit of Kendrick Lamar.
I remember you was
He's
conflicted.
one of my favorite artists, so you're gonna get a little more
Misusing
of
your
this.
influence. Sometimes I did the same. Abusing my power full of resentment. Resentment that turned into a deep depression. Found myself screaming in the hotel room. Lucifer was all around me. So I kept running. Until I found my safe haven. I was trying to convince myself the stripes I got. Making myself realize what my foundation was. In the room, and I run it. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. A war that was based on apartheid and discrimination. Hey, on my mama, nigga. R.I.P. Pat Dog. I'ma be the greatest to ever do this shit. On my mama, though, like, on the dead homies. Hey, Soundwave, turn this shit up, nigga. Turn this shit up. Soundwave, turn this shit up, nigga.
Tell me who the bitch nigga hating on me. Jumping on my dick, but this dick ain't free. To Pimp a Butterfly, another classic CD. Ghetto lullaby for everyone they MC. Blow, 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 blow. Nigga, not R.I.P. My diligence is only meant to write your eulogy.
All's my life I has to fight, nigga. All's my life I hard times like yeah, bad trips like yeah. Nazareth, I'm fucked up, homie, you fucked up, but if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
And when I wake up, I recognize you looking at me for the pay cut. Bahamas, I be looking at you from the face down. One Mac 11, even boom with the bass down. Skimming, and let me tell you about my life. Painkillers only put me in the twilight. With pretty pussy and Benjamin is the highlight. Now tell my mama I love her, but this what I like. Lord knows, 20 of them in my Chevy. Tell them all to come and get me, reaping everything I sow. So my karma come in heaven, no preliminary hearings on my record. I'm a motherfucking gangster in silence for the record. Tell the world I know it's too late. Boys and girls, I think I've gone great. Trying to side my faces all day. Won't you please believe when I say, when you know we've been hurt, been down before. Nigga, when our pride was low, looking at the world like, where do we go? Nigga, and we hate poor, wanna kill us dead in the street for sure. Nigga, I'm at the preacher's door. My knees getting weak and my gun might blow, but we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you
So if religion is about a wrestling with these fundamental questions of our existence. Who are we? What are we? When are we? I would argue that hip hop suggests that something about the mere asking of those questions is a kind of defiance that speaks a certain type of personhood. And I think there are ways in which Cardi B helps us understand this. Best life.
I'm living my best life. Yeah. I'm living my best life. Made a couple M's. you know. I said, I'm living my best life. I said, I'm living my best life. Made a couple M's with my best friends. Turned all my L's into lessons. You see the whip pulling up, it's like skirt. Dreams pulling up, I'm like skirt. I'm living my best life. It's my birthday, at least that's what I'm dressed like.
I'm like Big Pop mixed with Tupac. I'm like Machiavelli, Nita, Little Caesar pizza. I be hot and ready, nigga. You a pussy and a rat. You like Tom and Jerry, nigga. You ain't ballin', you just talking. That's that commentary. I was in the field, man. I slaved for this. Had to talk to God, drop down and pray for this. To my surprise, he replied, say you made for this. I seen the car, wanted, then I went and paid for it. Cash, cash, hit the take, yeah. I hit the race, hit the dash, dash. That's when they came for me on Twitter with the backlash. Cardi B is so problematic, it's the hashtag. I can't believe they wanna see me lose that bad. They talking junk and they sting these hoes, man.
In the context of the kind of work I do, my argument in part is that people of African descent, people who have been saddled with blackness, the mere fact of asking these questions, who, what, when, where, and why are we, is a marker of defiance that speaks a certain type of personhood. And that understanding this in a way that is poetic, that undercuts our assumptions, that renders us somewhat uncomfortable, allows us to better understand, in my context, what is black about black religion and what is religious about black religion. Sound has its own materiality, that is, its own realness, that touches various dynamics of life historically situated. Music, in a word, offers sonically arranged insights and impact around and across a range of issues and activities. And there is something aesthetically bespoke about these experiences because each has their own musical preferences with certain selections hitting harder than others. But music, in a more general sense, is a pliant force of human creation with the ability to alter perception and experience. And it says something, and it says something about and something to our larger meaning-making efforts. Thanks so much. Sure, I can do that. So let's chat.
Thank you for that beautiful, inspirational, sophisticated talk. It was lovely to hear. So I loved it. It was fantastic. And actually, my question is, you framed the project being about what music can tell us about religion, but it's interesting, and this is also because of my literary critic ear, you're very invested in thinking about creative writers or writers as well. Yeah. Could you talk about what role literature has to play and how you're thinking about this relationship between music and religion?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. Literature has been extremely important to me, particularly in my work related to Black humanism, trying to kind of understand and unpack Black humanism. And so I've turned to artists, literary figures who've raised fundamental questions, didn't necessarily understand themselves to be humanists, but they had a philosophical outlook, a kind of existential oomph that entails the kind of questions that Black humanism grows out of. So I think in terms of someone like Nella Larsen, Quicksand, right? Helga Crane. Think about Helga Crane. She's with this minister. She's not in the city anymore, right? Am I right? She's not in the city anymore. She has surrendered, right? It's raining in Harlem, and rain always means something about to happen, yes? It's raining in Harlem. Things are not working out. She is this tragic mulatto figure, yes? And she wanders into this church, and it's the movement of these bodies. There's a kind of erotic energy at play that brings her in. She's persuaded by this, right? Decides she marries this minister who is not the kind of dude she had been associated with. This minister moves with him. She's trying to be involved in this religious community, yeah? And it's not working out. They don't like her. Things aren't happening for her. She's having children who are literally destroying her physical integrity. And she's trying to do what church says to do. Pray about it, sister. She's praying about it, trying to work out, and she realizes, she knows now why God is not responding, yeah? Because there is no God. And for me, this requires some attention. How do we say that Black folks have always been, if not Christian, theistic, when in the context of this literature, you have them unpacking an alternate world? Or think about Richard Wright. It's easy with Richard Wright. I mean, that's really on the nose with Richard Wright. But I think for me, also important there was pieces like God's Trombone. Because folks will see this and say, okay, dude, he's committed, he's religious, yes? He's Christian. But for him, this was important because I needed a way to kind of think about theological vocabulary or grammar in a way that did not constitute commitment, that did not constitute an embrace of the tradition. And God's Trombones provides that because he says in autobiographical work that he wasn't a believer, but he sees that this language, this grammar has cultural significance, yes? And so he provides a model of how to do this work, how to think about Black humanism, make use of this grammar of wonder and awe without it being a theological commitment. And so literature has provided that, and to kind of think about alternate space, the spaces for wrestling with these issues of meaning making, who, what, when, where, and why we are. What are alternate spaces where Black non-believers, folks who are not going to church, not going to the mosque, where do they do this? Lorraine Hansberry helps with that. It's the living room, right? We take space and time, give them a certain type of intentionality, and create place. And so it provided a way to kind of think about Black humanism, to build it out, and to recognize the ways in which Black humanism is thought and ways in which it's practiced. And it was just impossible for me to do that without literature. Or someone like James Baldwin, right? When he's getting ready to meet the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he's worried for a variety of reasons. One being, Honorable Elijah Muhammad's going to ask him about his religion. And everybody knows him as the child preacher, but he leaves this behind, and he says that his religion is writing. It's about the crafting of worlds, right? Well, KRS-One is on this as well. KRS-One says that rappers are actually gods. Why? Because they create worlds with words. And so music is of fundamental importance to me, but I wouldn't have been able to kind of unpack Black humanism without the aid of literary figures. And Du Bois as well has been significant in this. But we should chat about Afrofuturism over against Afro-optimism and Afro-pessimism at some point. We have a question back here. I see you.
That was an amazing talk, thank you. I guess when I saw the title, I thought, okay, well, it's most common to connect music and religion through the concept of transcendence. But you've done something very different because the way you define religion is kind of through existentialism, like who are we, what are we? And it made me think, well, not only is that a powerful way to link music and religion and Blackness, but it also is marked by a specific historical period. And so I wanted to ask you to elaborate a bit about that because you began with your personal experiences with hip hop. And it seems like in some way, this existential link between music and religion and Blackness is a post-industrial question. It's conditioned by that framework or certain questions of consciousness that maybe are particular to those material circumstances. So I guess it's an invitation to talk a bit about the historical framing for this.
Okay, thank you. You only have to ask me once. And so first I would say not so much existentialism, because I'm being taught by Camus, and so I would argue it's Black moralism, that there's a kind of undergirding certainty with existentialism that makes me a bit nervous and defeats the point. And so moralism, I think, is more my thing because it's centered on asking the questions, pointing out the hypocrisies, but it doesn't offer a firm answer, right? Our affirmations have to be negated, or we just multiply the problem. So I would say, yeah, that my thinking is kind of guided by figures like Albert Camus, but also W.E.B. Du Bois, but thinking W.E.B. Du Bois in relationship to William James, thinking his sick soul, and the question for me that's most compelling in The Souls of Black Folk, how does it feel to be a problem? Right, so kind of thinking it that way. And I would argue that this issue with respect to the creative tension between music and religion, and I'll think in terms of my area of study, right? Black religious studies. It's as old as the Black presence here, right? And so we're familiar with the spirituals, right? And we can't accurately date the spirituals. We don't really know when they begin. We have a sense of how they're fine-tuned because scholars have told us that much of this fine-tuning takes place within the context of Ush Arbor meetings, these secret meetings of my ancestors, yeah? But we don't know a whole lot. If we did, they wouldn't have been so secret. We don't really have a sense, but as old as the spirituals, it's the blues. And don't think 20th century race records, but this kind of counter-narrative that is comfortable with discomfort, right? That is lodged in the materiality of life, that isn't vertical, but is horizontal, that questions all of the assertions, the theological assertions being made by the spirituals, is taking place at the same time. They are siblings. And so my argument would be no, as soon as a population is brought here and saddled with Blackness, this connection between these fundamental questions and the poetics of music, this happens.
Go here and then Aisha, you're next.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm Diana. My question is, so with the commercialization of Black sound, Black music, how does that complicate the tension between music and religion, or music as a way of punctuating life?
Yeah, I like that. And it's tough. I think there are ways in which it is commercialized. We see this. Right? I think Drake is an example of that. I'm not hating. He's an example of this. But I think there's also a kind of underlying intentionality. And so for me, one of the questions, the kind of hermeneutical questions I ask when looking at this is, where is the point at which the dominant population, the social world, is uncomfortable? And that's the point at which I want to explore this. Right, where is the point at which this explodes the norms, the assumptions of our social world? That's the point of contact for me. I think, and for me, this is a matter of research, but it's also a matter of pedagogy. I tell my students that what I offer them in the classroom is not a safe space. That for me, when we talk safe space, all too often in conversation, that means a space in which we are comfortable. And I don't think we do our best stuff in an environment in which we assume comfort, but that I want to privilege discomfort. I think there's something transformative about discomfort. It's at that point of discomfort that we are most aware of our assumptions and best positioned to wrestle with them. So I don't offer them a safe space. I offer them a space that is defined by trust. Right? You come in here, then we trust we are about the business of interrogation. And we're going to do that in ways that are thoughtful and respectful. Yeah, that this is what it's about. And so for me, thinking about this in the intersections of music and what I call religion, it's also about these points of discomfort. That for me, this is the place where we are most vulnerable with respect to our assumptions, most vulnerable with respect to what we assume meaning must mean. And that's where I want to dig.
That's two shots at Drake, but I've seen you move to Hotline Bling before.
No, tell the truth. Now, Jumpman, that's a different thing.
Yeah, like everyone else, thank you so much for a phenomenal talk. I think I have a few questions around. You said you're saying some very interesting things in your response here that are making me wonder now if I need to ask this, but I still will, which is, like you said, what I'm calling religion, right? And so I very much appreciate that. So you're through this talk, I'm getting a sense that there's the production of a certain category called religion that's happening actively because of this Black humanist approach that you're taking, right? That you're trying to think about what religion, specifically in relation to kind of Black humanism, its possibilities, right? And also then with music. And so my first question is, there's also like, to a certain extent, when you were talking about music initially, I get a sense that you're talking about the possibility or the openings and the self-reflection that music that possibility that opens up for all of us. But then there's a specific argument about Black religion and Black music and Black humanism. And so there's something specific about Blackness in all of this that foregrounds then what religion is and what music is specifically. So where am I going from here? Is that religion, it feels like, has to be something almost disenchanted for you in this. It's an opening through which a certain self-reflection can happen, but it's going to return to the human versus, like something, the transcendent, as Mike was saying. And yeah, he and I taught a class together, so this is where this is coming from as well on this. So then my question is really like, to what extent is like religion at all than anything more than any other, like music, religion, they all come to transpose on one another, right? So anything that offers us the possibility of self-reflection and to turn back to ourselves could technically be this thing called religion. That you're describing. Am I wrong, right?
Yeah, and this is the thing for me, that religion isn't a category that I think needs to be protected. I don't think it needs to be insulated and safeguarded. And so for me, religion isn't a thing, it's a technology. And I mean technology the way Foucault means technology, right? It's a device. It's a device we use to explore and explain human experience. This is all it is a tool for interrogating human experience. Why do we need to safeguard and prioritize or render special this particular tool? It's not as if it has historically offered us more life-affirming possibilities, right? And so I go to the Black church, and again, no hate here, but Black churches have historically done well with respect to issues of race, but the track record with respect to issues of sexuality and gender, horrific. The oldest Black denomination in the country is the African Methodist Episcopal Church. One of my favorite thinkers is Henry McNeil Turner. 1895, yeah? 1895, he argued in Atlanta, Georgia, that God is a Negro. Now, this is the same year, same location as Booker T. Washington's famous or infamous speech, depending on your particular framing, yes? God is a Negro. This man also argued in the Deep South, in the Deep South, that the U.S. flag is a dirty rag and will remain so until Black people are treated right. 1888, he ordained a woman. The General Conference told him that there was no call for this, and the ordination was void. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that Black women are ordained in this old denomination and have that ordination stick. You can't tell me that these churches have done justice, right? So it's not as if it has provided special possibilities, yes? It is just a tool. So I see no reason to safeguard it. Yes, it's a tool. It's a tool that tries to interrogate human experience, but we got a lot of tools. Our toolkit is full. This is just one of them.
Time for three questions. So we'll start here with Sarah, and then we'll end in front.
Dr. Penn, thank you for the talk, the lecture.
I saw you nodding back there. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then also just for your general work on theodicy, humanism, just massive contributions to theory and method in Black religion. And so the question is kind of pushing that direction. In your talk, I hear a lot of the focus on what Charles Long would call the extra church orientations of Black people. That, that's also the matter of sense making in the world. And so I'm curious, with that in mind, what do you see as the future of Black religious studies, also in the wake possibly of the studies of the Black church?
Thank you for that. And on some level, I see that connection because some of my work involved an effort to bring together Charles Long and my advisor, Gordon Kaufman. But the terminology, it seems to me, highlights the problem, right? And the problem is the centrality of the Black church, kind of understanding what it means to be Black and religious in the context of the United States only through that extra church orientation. So, yeah. My hope is that what will continue within Black religious studies is this more theoretical push. I think we've done a lot of work that is descriptive. We've moved the landscape, understood it, massaged it in a way that renders the idea of Black theology, of Black humanism no longer foreign, right? So there isn't the same sort of pushback. So we kind of understand how religion has manifested, and we see that in rather complex ways, but we still need to do much more work that is theoretical, that so much of the undergirding theoretical work is really Black and womanist theologies that are not highly theoretical. So I'd like to see much more work done with respect to a conversation with Afrofuturism, Afro-pessimism, Afro-optimism, right? So I think decolonial studies, right? So lots of students now are moving in the direction of Sylvia Wynter, but I think much more work needs to be done. There are other voices that we ought to hear because they will help us to kind of interrogate the underlying infrastructure and will provide us with a much more robust set of tools, a much more robust grammar and vocabulary. So that is my hope, that that theoretical push will continue.
Thanks so much. I am interested in hearing more about Afrofuturism, so I invite you to tell us about that if you have thoughts, but that you'd like to share. But I also was just thinking about the sounds and thinking about the forms of possibility that happen, not necessarily always in the lyrics, but the kind of soundscapes. And so I was wondering if, you played Sun Ra, which offers, very different sorts of possibilities. So I wondered if maybe you could speak a little bit about I don't know, like musical theory, or like music theory, or things that kind of help us to think about something ineffable that you can't necessarily say with words, which is a part of music. And I was thinking about, I talked about this recent book on contemporary Christian music. It was talking about how it's like there's no minor chords in this music, and so like what does that mean if minor chords aren't allowed? Like that creates or limits particular possibilities sonically. So I don't know if you just have other examples that you can share that, I don't know, show us what possibilities are out there.
Yeah, and I think the critique is real, and I get it a lot in terms of work on hip hop. My concern is really the lyrical content, not the sound, right? So in terms of background, it's not musicology for me, it's theomusicology. John Michael Spencer's earlier work, that for me is engaging, but even that work is lyrically driven. And so that's my orientation with the music. I'm much more concerned with the lyrical content. And I want to appreciate the ways in which sound alters us, the way in which sound opens us up, but not interested in it enough to do heavy lifting. Did you mention Sylvester Johnson? Oh, that's my friend. If you see him, tell him
Okay, so as the last questioner, I think I'm going to bring us back to the beginning. As a student of religious studies, we always start every semester, what is religion? And I heard you ask that, and you might need to go back in your notes. I missed, even though I had a pen and paper, I missed what you said about what is religion. And it starts out, a quest for.
My friend, I have this memorized. For a good number of years, I argued that religion is a quest for complex subjectivity, that it's the human effort to come to grips with the fundamental questions of our existence. Who are we? When are we? What are we? Why are we? And I wanted to detangle what religion actually is from the material responses to that quest. So for me, what we find housed in churches, mosques, and synagogues, doctrines and hymns and this sort of stuff, it is the residue of this quest. It isn't religion, it's what's left after this quest. For me, what is more fundamental, what is important, is the idea of religion as this quest. This was my way of thinking about it for a very long time until 2012 21. And at that point, in conversation with folks, and I think it's important for us to be able to say, I wasn't quite right there. Right? I think that's really important, that there's a pedagogical value in failure. And so I realized that that quest for complex subjectivity, that theory, really wasn't doing the kind of work I needed it to do, that it actually assumed something I had not fully discussed. That this quest for complex subjectivity was actually the ethical, psychological response. It wasn't really this quest. And so then I started to kind of think this differently and be in conversation with a host of different conversation partners. And now I think about religion as simply a technology. And again, I'm turning to Foucault. It's a technology. It's a device we use for exploring human experience. It doesn't have any particular charge.
Well, that's probably the perfect way to end a religious studies lecture. So thank you so much, Dr. Pin, for a really incredible talk. Let's give him another round. A few quick reminders. If you are not on our newsletter, you can sign up right there at the table. And please stay. We have a reception. There is food. There is drink in the Joan and Walter Mondale Commons, which is just out that door. So please stick around, and thank you all for coming. Thanks.